November 5th, Forest Lake School Board meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please take a roll call.
Member Crawford? Here. Member Parker is here. Member Skip? Member Phillips? Here. Member Cato is here. Member Olson? Here. Here. Member Olson is here. Member Rayfield?
Present.
Member Rayfield is present. Member Tyson? Here. Member Tyson is here. Member Peterson?
Here.
Peterson is here. And Member Wilson is here.
Thank you. This time I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes. All right. Scheduled and unscheduled visitors, listening session. Member Lieutenant.
Alex.
Oh, Member Cato.
On the listening session, we had a total of 4 people come in. One person supported or was discussing the labor agreement we have coming up, the PLA that's going to be coming up. And we had 3 people come in and talk about specifically about our move from elementary to the hybrid. So that was it for the listening session.
Thank you, Member Cato. Then we have Gary Lee from the Forest Lake Lions Club.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I had an hour speech planned and then joined it. 1 minute. So
Well, I got you booked for an hour and a half.
Great, I love that. I used to be a teacher once before a couple of awards. So anyway, we had understood early in the game this summer that there's going to be a lot of consternation about how you're going to do school this year, and that there would be a lot of problems with families keeping up with hybrid type learning and internet, and the rural areas, some of them don't have the good internet and so on and so forth. So anyway, the Lions Club, the Forest Lake Lions Club, set aside some money to put into a fund, and we understood that, I think Tefla and probably Rangers Helping Rangers started a fund that was intended to be used to help families have hotspots or pay for internet or help them with the cost of internet and that kind of thing, so that the students can continue with their hybrid learning and distance learning and whatever else we're doing this year. So the other thing that we did was we, and I don't really want to put anybody on the spot, but we decided that we would challenge the other Lions clubs in our district. And so we said, here's what we're going to do, and we challenge you to match us. And we didn't come up with a lot of success there. But we did have Wyoming Lions also contributed some money toward it. So it's the Forest Lake Lions and the Wyoming Lions, and I have checks for you from both of us for use. And we did put on the form that you guys require that we want it restricted to be used for helping the families with internet access. So whoever wants to have the check, and the only thing I'd like to do is have a photo opportunity so that I can so I can prove to the other Lions that I was actually
You want to maybe switch on
everybody's looking at their stuff.
I am too.
So
3 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Board President. My name is Adam Hansen. I'm representing the group Associated Builders and Contractors of Minnesota. Our membership is over 350 contractors and subcontractors throughout the state who build everything from multifamily housing, retail establishments, and yes, even schools. Several of our members in the area and the surrounding areas have been fortunate enough to actually work on Forest Lake schools, various solar installations, electrical work, and several other trades. Unfortunately, our members and their employees are concerned about the project labor agreement the district is going to, or the board is entertaining tonight. Those project labor agreements are union-only agreements. And in Minnesota, 80% of all construction workers choose not to be a part of a union. So a project labor agreement that the board would adopt excludes 80% of the construction workers in the state, including those right here who live here, pay taxes here, send their kids to schools here, whose kids are hopefully going to play on the sports complex that their tax dollars pay for. A PLA by its terms requires a contractor to be signatory to a union and hire almost exclusively through a union hall. PLAs also require merit shop or non-union contractors to pay into union fringe benefit funds that their existing employees won't ever benefit from. So it's kind of a double whammy. They pay their existing employees health and benefit funds. They also have to pay into a union fund. It doesn't make much sense. So because of these concerns, you hardly ever see merit shop contractors bidding on PLA projects. I could cite studies and examples of this going on, but I think a good one to look at is comparing what happened in White Bear Lake versus what happened here 4 years ago. Last fall, voters in White Bear Lake approved $326 million in new school construction. It's phenomenal. New schools, additions to new schools. Our members do a lot of that work. When they met in February, April, and May of this year, 3 different times, they discussed if they should do a PLA for those hundreds of millions of dollars of projects. The board voted 5-1 to reject the PLA. 5-1 to let everybody bid, everybody compete on $326 million worth of work. You know what happened? When they let those scopes of work out for bid, when they said, hey, electrical workers, or electrical contractors, send us your bids. HVAC folks, send us your bids. They're getting 5 and 6 bids from companies all throughout the metro, including in White Bear Lake. 4 years ago, when Forest Lake adopted the PLA, on $143 million worth of work, we were getting 1 or 2 bids for electrical, for example. I shared those at the listening session. Be happy to share the data. I'd also like to just put on the record that we think there's a conflict of interest with this board, and particularly one member, discussing and voting on an agreement that would give a monopoly to the Carpenters Union under the PLA. I wanted to get that on the record. Thank you for my time.
All right, moving on. Student achievement.
Good evening, Superintendent of Forest Lake Area Schools, Dr. Matson, Dr. Massey, and school board members as well. My name is Neil Fox, the elementary school principal at Columbus Elementary, and I'll be brief tonight. I did provide each of you a kind of a one-page summary there too that you're welcome to look at. The elementary principal as an instructional leader. The opening of the school year this year in the midst of a global pandemic has created some anxiety. However, our instructional work as leaders, we've worked tirelessly to support, coach, and inspire teaching and learning in new and different ways. The what and the how has changed tremendously for most people this year, but the why, the purpose, has always been the same. Even though our model of instruction changes starting next Tuesday, we stand ready to provide excellence for every student every single day. What gets noticed in our work as elementary principals, I kind of summed up here for you in kind of 4 areas. Number 1, for me and for colleagues that I work with, interactions with all staff and students is very important. So as we know, relationships do matter. Knowing the names of all of our families and students as they walk through the door from an E6 perspective is very important. And the E piece of it is the preschool piece of it. For example, I have about 40 students that are preschool kiddos in the elementary school building, 20 of which have older siblings, so it's pretty easy to get to know the names of those kids and those families, but very, very important. Another aspect of that is just greeting the students every single day when they walk into the school building, making sure that you wave goodbye to them every single night and tell them that can't wait to see them tomorrow. We've had to do some quarantining this year as well too, so that message gets sent out to elementary parents, and it's very important that the principal there is part of that, taking the kid down to be received by mom and dad and letting the mom and dad know that things will be all right, and we'll see you in 10 to 14 days. Also welcoming in new students. Columbus is not a very transient populated area, but when we do have new students in, it's that welcoming piece. And so on Monday I had a new fourth grader that started, and I knew that that person was going to be dropped off, and I think it's just important to be there at that drop-off, greeting that new student that's coming into your school building. Attending after-school events and weekend events is stated there as well. And then visibility throughout the school building every single day. Something that's non-negotiable. Non-negotiable for me is getting out of the rooms every single day. It kind of gives you a pulse of what's taking place in the school building. Of course, another area is empathy with our families and students. And so the biggest lesson that I've learned in this whole COVID crisis has been the amplification of inequities with some of our families. And so that outreach to our families of what can we do to help and assist you, whether that be a hotspot or a Chromebook or food. While all that is taking place, still high learning of expectations for all students is in place. Of course, communication for all of our administrators. And so we send out weekly via emails, via Blackboard Connect. I'm not as good as I probably should be maybe on the Facebook and the Twitter sort of thing, a little bit old school when it comes to that, but I do take an opportunity once a week to call 5 students and families at home. So calling that parent at home, letting them know that I'm so proud of Johnny and Susie in the classroom. I continually see them working hard and getting smart and being kind to one another in the school building. Those calls go a long way. We do send home cool cougars to our students as well too, and so parents get pretty excited about putting this on their refrigerator, and the other portion of it goes into monthly drawings that we have in our school building that we do during the lunch and recess time. Our mini paws are a part of our PBIS, and so kids love these opportunities to be able to win different things in the classroom, or maybe have lunch with the classroom teacher, or come down and read to Mr. Fox, or have a wiffle ball game in the gym with a special friend as well too. So communication is really big. The fourth thing that the public probably sees is just the community events and supports, and so a lot of things that take place with our PTOs. This year we're a little unique. We brought the pumpkin patch to Columbus, and so I was fortunate enough to have my kindergarten students and preschool students select their pumpkin out in the Columbus area, as well as just thinking differently what we do. We had, last Friday night we had a drive-in movie theater presented out at Columbus, since we had 80 cars in the parking lot, and everybody stayed in their cars and were socially distanced, and so we had a drive-in opportunity, as well as digital book fairs. Columbus Lions is very active out in our area too. Poster contest, meeting with me to talk about Thanksgiving and the holiday seasons of some families that might be in need, in which we'll go adopt a family or two and making sure that they're able to celebrate the seasons as well. Of course, like community education too, a lot of programs going on after school too. The principal is a part of those things too. Just welcoming in families, and a lot of them aren't even Columbus families, but just introducing yourself to that family that's coming from Lino or from Lakes International Language Academy, and welcome to Columbus, and da-da-da-da-da. So those opportunities that are part of being visible in the school building. Then, maybe a little bit of information I just kind of call a bird's eye view of our work, so to speak, is how do we support learning as instructional leaders? And so I have about 8 little points in here, because this gets into a little bit deeper weeds into what our work looks like from an elementary perspective. Staffing is a big part of what we do, and so we have a real school building, the right people that are part of our community, and the right people that will be a good fit for our elementary age kids. Sometimes it comes down to community culture too, and so I know that in the Columbus area, I'm always looking for that perfect fit, that perfect model that's going to be a part of my school building. Staff members too that are hired have to have that growth mindset as the science changes a lot in education. So right now we're going through a big uplift of our literacy practices and the sciences that are behind literacy. And so just trying to figure out in those early years as an educator, is this person adaptable and being able to change and being able to grow as the sciences of education grow. Instructional coaches have been just an absolute blessing in the school buildings for us. And so obviously more would be great, but we are thankful to have 4 literacy coaches and 1 mathematics coach as well too. A couple of things that they do in partnership with the elementary school principals are listed out here. So I work really closely with Heidi Weiber, assigned to my building as a literacy coach, and Katie Gross as well too. And so supporting teachers and identifying and teaching through priority standards, understanding what the standards are in each of the grade levels for all the content areas. Identify necessary professional development to support district initiatives, bringing forward knowledge of new legislation and science behind how students learn, curriculum review and alignment of the standards, identifying the weaknesses of our curriculum to ensure all students are learning with rigorous and high quality instruction. Obviously, I could come up with a few more things the instructional coaches do, but that just kind of gives you an idea of the work that takes place behind the scenes. Also, too, buildings have what we call safe space, bullying, social, emotional, and PBIS teams in place. My summary of that would be that these teams are a part of the school building in which the principals need to lead, guide, and be behind as we create a positive and accepting climate for all of the students. And so we want, obviously we want this tremendous amount of time and effort goes into this sort of thing, but it also makes the building successful in its operations. For me, I've always enjoyed the data piece of the work from an elementary principal, so I'm constantly monitoring local, classroom, and statewide data. And so some of these terms you may have heard of before when I think of the word FAST, which was NWA was replaced by FAST, and FAST is our formative assessment system for teachers. Knowing that data inside and out so that you can not only crunch the numbers, but to find out how the data can drive instructional practices and changes. And so we monitor the tools to help educators screen, monitor kids' progress, and analyze the data in reading, math, social, emotional work of our K through 6 students. Sometimes classroom data, right down to that local data too, where it be spelling inventories or intervention data or classroom benchmark data too is closely looked at. Spent a lot of time this year for myself learning and understanding building data meetings in my school building, understanding how my special education students are progressing, how my EL students are progressing as learners as well. MCA freeze, kind of statewide data. You're pretty familiar with MCA freeze, even though we did not have them last year, but those are the federal and state legislature requirements that my students in grades 3 through 6 have to take, both math and reading and science in grade 5. So what's that information telling me? And sometimes that data gets to us late, and I'm not able to get to the following year, but still that data is telling me some sort of a story. And usually if you're able to peel back that data, you can sit with your educators and develop a game plan for the student to be more successful the following year. Also to local work with my academic specialist. I have math and reading core people that are in my school building, and then I have before and after school this year virtual educators as well too in our WIN Club, which used to be called Extended Day. So those interventions are more specific, one-on-one or small group with identified students for targeted interventions. But the elementary principal as an instructional leader really needs to understand what the interventions are, number one, what they're telling you, and what the results of the kids that are in the district knows, we have a QComp plan in place. I believe this is Forest Lake's 7th year, part of the QComp plan, which is a fancy way for basically saying it's an ultimate teacher compensation plan. And I believe Dr. Matson brought into the school district 7 years ago. It provides time for collegial collaboration and in-depth, meaningful professional development, sometimes referred to as PLCs. QComp plan has peer coaches in place. So I work hand in hand, almost on a daily basis with a peer coach. And this year, my peer coach is Joyce Reed. So we talk about what resources and support through her observation and through my feedback that we can utilize to move teachers along with cognitive coaching strategies, more self-directed, getting better at the craft of teaching. The work around our PLC work, when teachers do gather, the work is around 4 essential questions that guide our teacher work during the PLCs. It's part of Richard DeFore's work. Supporting individual and building goals through targeted through PD. We have 180 minutes, which 135 minutes is part of the district PD time, and 45 minutes is when the teachers are meeting during their monthly PLCs. Elementary buildings also have site facilitators in place too. At Columbus, it's Brittany Jakubiak. There's not a day that her and I do not talk about what collaboration that we need to do as far as our PD on a monthly basis with the staff. We sit down in the summertime and develop a yearly plan that supports teaching and learning and the changes that are taking place with teaching and learning, making sure that our educators feel supported. Of course, you might be familiar with the observation pieces of educators. Elementary principals and secondary principals will go through pre- and post-conferences with educators to improve instruction, as well as increase student learning and success. With our teaching staff, and by the way, we have classified staff as well too. Columbus has about 20 to 25 classified staff members in which they have an evaluation process to go through with the principal as well. Our peer coaches do perform 3 observation cycles yearly with the teachers in the school building, and the principals are observing continuing contract teachers that are on a high cycle once every 3 years. Any probationary teachers that are in my school building, and this year I have 7, those teachers are formally observed by me 3 times a year as a probationary teacher. Curriculum, as an instructional leader, you really need to understand the curriculum. And not just for the curriculum as to what's on cycle and what's hot. Right now in this fall we're in curriculum review in science, K through 5 and 7 through 12. Our arts is going through curriculum review, 9 through 12. Music, K-12 is getting looked at. The big one is ELA, the literacy piece is getting looked at. We have an implementation date of 2024 to have our literacy standards in place. So we have time, but those meetings and stuff start now. And then Ed and Health is taking place 7/12 in the fall as well. Elementary, our curriculum and health is a little outdated too, so that'll be a part of our work as well. So 5 departments taking place in the fall seems like a lot, but it's something that the elementary principals need to be aware of. The instructional review dates, what are the critical needs that are needed in the curriculum review, and a part of those discussions in order to be a leader as an instructional leader. And then finally, we have formal walkthroughs and daily classroom visits. A formal student engagement walkthrough happens for every educator, each educator, 3 times a year. So we have to share the results. There's some record keeping for the teacher development evaluation system. There's a summative report that comes to the end of that as well too, making sure that all of our students are engaged in the classroom. We know that students that are engaged are often motivated in the classroom. And so a high priority for all of us is the witnessing the learning that's occurring in your school building. And those walkthroughs and daily classroom visits are very important. So in conclusion, as you know, there's a lot of pieces that go into being a great instructional leader. And we believe all families and students deserve highly qualified, highly performing principals and educators. And so I just want to thank you for your support, and also state that I'm very excited at the three new principals that we have working for us this year as well too. Gretchen Matson out at Linwood, Lord Sheldon at Wyoming, and remind me, Julie Hall at Scandia. Julie replaced by Julie. So yeah, they are doing an outstanding job. There's probably not a day or two that doesn't go by that I'm in contact with one of them. And I'm really excited about the work that they're doing daily, but just listen to them, what they're doing instructionally in their building as well too. The daily stuff gets noticed, but the instructional stuff that takes place behind the scenes truly makes our school special. Any questions from anybody? I know it's a lot, but
I do have one.
yes.
So is this, all the principals? Like, did you get together as a group and come up with this, or is this Mr. Fox's special formula?
That's my piece of it. You know, that's my piece of it. But we as a principal group meet as a PLC, you know, as well too, and we talk, you know, weekly as well too. And I can tell you that these practices are shared in all of our elementary buildings. And just seeing the work that's coming out of them and getting to that first phase of making those relationships and connections, but knowing them kind of as people and their past experiences coming to Forest Lake area schools, those areas will continue to grow as well too. It takes time. I just happen to have about a 23-year advantage on most of them.
You know,
For
the
sure.
collaboration you guys do as a team,
Yes.
sharing this work and learning from each other is ongoing. So it is really a framework that not only Neil's work, but all of our leaders.
Question, Mr. Fox.
Yes.
Can you speak to how your testing is on track given the pandemic and we've had time face-to-face, and could you speak to that? We've got one section about.
Yeah, the fast testing that we do 3-4 times a year is very important to us. And so now I notice that even the fast testing is even narrowed down even further, because you can take that test and have a little kind of side test taking place, like in kindergarten through PALS, or through first grade through WordWorks. So there's opportunities for us to get data instantaneously, but then the key is being able to sit down with the team, which we do, and talk about what are we going to do with that data. I mean, we need to be able to do something with it. And so when we're able to kind of, in the past, group kids up from different rooms, become more effective that way, and now we're kind of having to stay with the pods and not kind of cross things. That's been a little bit of a hindrance, you know, to us. But the classroom teachers have been amazing as far as taking these 2-3 kids, and that group of kids maybe doesn't need me right now during this time, but this group of kids needs me to double dip today, because they're just not getting that particular letter or that particular sound as a kindergarten teacher. That's just one example.
Okay.
Yeah.
4 literacy and 1 math.
Yep.
Are they just assigned to your building?
They are.
So
Yep.
they're there every day.
Yep, the 4 literacy is shared amongst all the elementary buildings.
Oh.
So Heidi Weiberg is shared between Columbus and Scandia.
Oh.
And those coaches, you'll recall, is a direct component of the operating referendum that was passed through as well. And
Yep.
those are pieces that we're able to have.
Fabulous. So I just want to add that it's a testament to what a good educator and leader you are, the way you have
Appreciate that.
the daily classroom visits and you dial down on all that data. It's so important. So thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. I will say, I think the literacy and math coaches have transformed our work as educators and even as instructional leaders in the school building. Very strong people in those areas, and they are doing a tremendous job in our elementary schools, truly.
That's fantastic.
Up to 400 and some kids. How many names don't you know?
I think I got it down. There might be a preschooler or 2, but that's easy because those double on me. Yeah.
It's
Ranger Academy kid, I had, 57 that are out in there, but I think 360, I think I got them all down. That's important. It's important.
So I just wanted to thank you for your many years of service.
Well, thanks.
You are
Yeah.
just an amazing
Thanks.
educator, and we're very blessed to have you in Columbus.
Thank you, Joe.
So you do a great job. Thank you. Great presentation.
I just wanted to come in, I really appreciate you incorporating some events that help people get that social aspect in life.
Yes.
It's a real struggle.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Great turnout. I couldn't believe the turnout. Yeah. Great event.
Can I ask about the drive-in?
Yeah.
How did you, like, did you?
We went and bought a big,
Did you?
as big as this room. It was just unbelievable. So, now someone wants to put on a hay wagon and video, and it'll get bigger and bigger. Yeah, it was fantastic. And it was the car radio, you could dial it into car radio. That went right through there. So.
People on BDA was all over.
PTA, yeah. It ended up turning into, you just gotta get creative. We're not doing some of the fundraisers that we normally would do. And so I think we had 80 vehicles and it turned, we just asked for a $10 donation per car. And many people gave us more than a $10 donation per car. So it was about $1,000 a night. About $1,000 a night. So.
And I did see the pumpkin patch pictures.
Is that great?
That
Yeah.
was so fun.
I just, how that turned out, it ended up, all of our preschool and kindergarten students, we'd always go to pumpkin patch, we couldn't go, they all left with pumpkin. And yet, we all had all the stations, so that they got to do everything. The parents weren't there, but they got all the pictures and they got all the things that were part of the pumpkin patch experience, so. You have to do those sort of things. You have to be creative. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your work, too.
Thank you.
We'll move to the high school EMS update, President Falco.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Massey, and the rest of the school board, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. As you know, we have received the DLI grant now for 2 years in a row, the Department of Labor and Industry, and we've developed career pathways and clusters. This last year, the DLI grant went toward our medical career cluster as well as our autos cluster. Exciting to announce tonight, and Tracy will fill in some of the details, but we've received not one, but 2 ambulances from North Memorial for free. We will get them wrapped in Forest Lake colors. They will represent our EMT EMR program and be out in the community. But Tracy, hats off to her. She took over a program that was started through Dr. Massey, Dr. Matson, and Mr. Kendrick, and for the last 2 years it's done nothing but grow this program. So I'm going to step away and let Tracy brag about herself and her students.
I won't be doing that. Thank you, Mr. Caldwell. So as far as the McKinney ambulances is super cool, and most of you know Joe Graft, correct? Having Joe Graft in my corner, and he goes a million miles an hour. We can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And I'm like, you just point me in the right direction, and I'll do it, right? So I started EMS Club, which is a club where the kids take the EMR class, which you have to take EMR before you take EMT. EMR is historically referred to as first responders. Every recent firefighter is trained to a minimum of an EMR level. If they take the EMR class and pass, then they can take the EMT class if they so choose. EMT, of course, as you may or may not know, kids come out of high school. Many of them will pass and do pass the National Registry test. And they come out of high school with a marketable skill. I've had kids go literally 6 weeks after high school working on an ambulance. So talk about baptism by fire, right? So the EMS Club is designed, or the idea behind it is to really be whatever it can be to whoever it can be, right? Whoever needs it. The EMS Club has worked all of the youth football games over at Fenway last year and this year. This year they had to call 911 because they thought they had a fractured hip, so that was a little high stress level, which is awesome for those guys. So, thankfully the kid did not have a fractured hip, but it definitely presented like one. So, they called 911 and then they got to see what it was like, you know, working firsthand with the crew on the rig and then getting in the back of the rig and seeing what happens in the back of the rig. Ems Club will be working football games after we have the ambulance wrapped so we can look super cool and set up that football field. And don't worry, we're not going to transport anybody. But it can be like the first line of defense, not only for anything on field, but of course where there are people gathered, stuff can happen. So I think it's almost more so for the people in attendance than for anybody on the field because we have Logan who did a fabulous job. Plus, we're going to take one of those ambulances after it's all wrapped and fancy and park it over at Fenway for those youth football games and soccer and lacrosse and whatever we can get our hands on. And be very visible. The Ems Club works with Joe Graft and his customized safety training. We've done CPR and first aid for the transportation employees so far this year. Last year we did maybe custodians and kitchen staff or whoever needed to refresh their CPR or their first aid. So kids think they're pretty cool. They feel pretty, you know, when they can walk over to somebody and say, shoulders this way, you know, when they come back to the adult, they feel, especially some of the teachers or whatever, they feel pretty empowered. And one of the coolest things about not only the Ems Club, but the EMR class and the EMT class, they've had a lot of feedback from kids. I sent out a text message the other week knowing that I was coming to do this tonight, and I said, I sent it out to kids who had Kendricks, the kids who I had. I've had like 24 kids in the last 2 years, probably more, because there's probably a couple that have taken them past the registry that I don't know about, but at least 24 kids have taken them past the national registry that I've got kids working as EMTs on campuses kind of all over the place, and you know, then they have a job on campus and they're doing what they like to do. And, but one of the most powerful statements I got from one of the kids was, she didn't go into EMS, she took the national registry test and passed it. And she said, what the EMT class and that whole program did for me was gave me self-confidence. Confidence in my personal life, confidence in school, confidence in who I am. And like that right there that's I think the big goal, the kind of the icing on the cake. This is an incredible thing. I tell people what I do. I say, I have hands down the best job at the high school. I have the best job. Because kids want to be there and they are engaged and they're constantly learning things. And they come back to class and they're like, I saw a car accident and da-da-da-da-da-da, and they can relate it to the real world. So that's what I got going on. Any questions, any comments?
Just before we get to questions, one thing I would add is go on record just to thank M Health as well.
Oh,
M
yeah.
Health Fairview. M Health Fairview is totally going to fit these rigs out with stretchers and all the materials that they need. One will be set up as a critical care ambulance, and the other one will be set up as more of a
like a mobile training
type facility. So kids will actually be working in ambulances, so when they go on their ride-alongs, they're going to know where everything is and all of those things. We could not do this on a shoestring without partners like M Health.
M Health has been absolutely awesome.
Phenomenal since they moved in.
Yep, they're super willing to take riders and whatever. And I also need to recognize Lakes Region EMS because last year when North was on their way out and M Health was on their way in, we kind of had a very last minute change of plans, and Lakes Region EMS stepped up huge, took our students, made it super simple for them to sign up for their ride-alongs. They were fabulous to work with, and they are going to be working with our students again this year as well. So our kids have ample opportunity to get onto these ambulances and get first-hand experience. You know, these kids are doing, they're not just watching, because I've had people say, well, do they just ride along and watch us? No way, man. They get in there, they're hooking up 12 leads when people are having heart attacks, and they're looking at strips and going, that doesn't look normal. You're right, it's not. So they're doing CPR, they're doing all kinds of things. So thanks for the opportunity really for me to do what I do. And I couldn't do it without all the support of all of you and Caldwell and so many other people. So thanks. I got to go to Chapter High School. Maybe in the district.
Any questions or?
Questions?
I just wonder how many students do you have like in a class and like per year, kind of just a couple?
Normal year or right now?
Well, before all this crazy.
So, I think we capped the EMT class at 24, 25. And that was happened before I came, but it was about the perfect number. So 24 kids in there, and then I've got them for 4th and 5th hour block, so 3 hours a day for 2nd and 3rd quarter, 18 weeks. And they learned a whole lot. They work really hard. It's a lot of work, but they're happy to do it.
It's a great thing that we can give them the
It
opportunity
is.
to do something that they love.
It is. It's awesome. And some of these kids, I've had kids that ended up in the EMR class by accident. They're like, I thought I was going to be a dispatcher. The kid that said that is working on an ambulance right now. So, and she said it changed her life. She had no idea what she wanted to do, and got into that class, and she's like, I found my purpose. And that was like, hey,
Life-changing.
that's life. It is life changing. Absolutely. So the opportunities that we open up for these kids are amazing. So thank you very much.
I just want to add one quick thing, Tracy. Thank you for all of your energy and enthusiasm. You just knock it out of the park.
Thanks, Neil.
And I know graduates, Emily Grindall, I mean, they got right into nursing programs, got assisted living jobs right away because they had this real world experience in our classes and working at games. And so that's just so fabulous that they have that under their belt before they even start there.
I agree, and Jody Ryan teaches the nursing program, the CNA class, and she and I are a medical careers department, and we have done some collaboration. Last year, in fact, March 13th was the last day we did it, where the nursing students, we do simulation, and they have a scenario, and they just have to recognize if there's an emergency and do what they do on their end, and then call 911, and then we do what we do on our end. And it was a lot of fun. Kids really had a great time doing it and learned a lot. So, you're welcome, Gail. Thanks. You bet.
I would echo Member Tyson's sentiments. I know I've heard from multiple students about the class and the enthusiasm and energy you bring to it. So I really appreciate the work you do.
Thanks, Jeff. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any other comments, questions?
Thank you.
Keep up on the fun.
Absolutely.
Let's move on to positive happenings. It's a tough year for that, but I would like to start and say congratulations to those of you who are on the ballot this Tuesday. So welcome back. And then we'll go to Member Olson.
Yes, I have been participating in the Everyone Belongs Innovation Labs. I attended the October 13th and the October 20th, and I believe there are 4 more on the schedule. One next Tuesday. So great discussion, communication, insight into the district. So highly recommend you have that.
Very good.
Yeah, I also attended the last meeting for Everyone Belongs, and it's just it's so important for us to be thinking about these equity issues and making sure that every kid feels like they belong here and that our curriculum is really tailored. Our curriculum represents everybody. Everybody feels like they're part of it.
Yeah, I just want to echo that I've been on those We Belong meetings, and I see Steve's little head and square. It's just great. I was in the community portion of it with Member Olson, and just the feedback from the community, how they're embracing the importance of this social justice work and using that just for building blocks in our community to make it more welcoming for all. It's just been really fun and looking forward to it. I also went to SEAC, just fun to hang out with those folks, and Alexa Nelson, the communication coordinator, gave an update. She just does amazing work with community ed. I think you've all seen this Safely Open to our community out, and it's been great. The other thing she's working on is it's Celebrate Community Education Day, November 12th. So looking forward to that. I also was on a call with District 5 and 6 directors, so everybody from our area, 5 and 6 district was on there, and Anita right there, everybody. It was just a great call to compare notes. Everybody did a poll to start out with, and of course we were the only ones that were doing face-to-face, so there was a lot of questions, and it was just great to compare notes about how we're all supporting our staff and their mental health and supporting our parents through this, and all of our, everybody that's just working so hard to get through this and to adjust, and so it was great, great call. Also I did listen to the webinar. It was Tom Melcher's last one, and he was announced his retirement, and everybody kind of got to give him some well wishes, but the school commissioner's school finance working group that our superintendent participated in. I did see the slides. Member Corcoran got those forwarded to me, as well as the finance slides. So there was some really good takeaways on there as far as, specializing cross-subsidy and just all those proposals that kind of got filtered down into what were the big picture ones. I mean, I think some of ours are really addressing, so it's good news. The last thing, I can't really read it. I attended for the Child Protection Panel. They do a spotlight on foster families through the whole county by sending them a thank you card, and the panel works on giving them some kind of a coupon or something to do as a family event, which is kind of hard to do during COVID. But we have 13 families in Forsyth that do foster care for children that are in protective services. So that's about it. Thank you.
Much less productive month. So I attended the PTO meeting for Rhino Lakes, saw the end of community soccer, which it was a nice round of just playing games with kids within the same zip code, so we ended up playing every team twice, but it was much better than nothing, and I really didn't think we had cross-contamination issues. We're all kind of in the same schools anyway, so I appreciated that we had at least halfway there. And I finished up the MSBA level 3 and 4 that we both attended, and pretty much worked on some election stuff, so glad to have that be over.
I did not have very active, I guess, great. Well, the part was Halloween. I had 150 kids come to my door, which I thought was pretty impressive, seeing them probably weren't supposed to be trick-or-treating, but I ran out of candy, and that's never happened. So I mean, just to see such a beautiful night, and all of the cute, adorable children everywhere. So I did feel safe with them in bags, and safe, but it was adorable. And what was I going to say? I saw the Ranger football game from the distance. I didn't, of course, I can't. I don't even know if we can go, but I saw it from the road. It was 1919 at the end of the game. I don't know if they won last Friday, but they did. Okay, it was 1919 at the very end of the game. I was watching it, and so I guess, and the election, of course. So I'm glad we have our school board back, and looking forward to working together for another few years.
I guess this month, what I'd have to say is it was kind of a stay-home month for us, because we're kind of my wife and I are both in kind of the high-risk area for COVID, and we actually did have a COVID scare. My wife actually ended up getting a fever and things, and so we kind of hunkered down more than anything, so it really wasn't open community a whole lot this month.
You're safe.
Yes. Thank you. Everything was fine.
Workshops and conferences.
On that one, Kate already mentioned it, but Kate and I both attended phase 3. Ironically, I don't know how I did it. I did 4 first, and then I realized I hadn't done 3. But it's the Minnesota School Board Association, and the phase 3 is entitled Building a High-Performance School Board Team. And I thought that was probably the best one of the 4 that they do. And what I took away from it, one of my many things that I do is I'm also a life and career coach on top of everything else. One of the things I took away is how we might be able to build a more effective and better team, understanding what all of our advantages are, disadvantages I thought that was a very valuable session.
I've got one other thing that I forgot is that I had, everybody knows I've got a child in middle school, 8th grade, and we had conferences, right? And she's doing full off-site. And we had a conference, all the teachers came on at the same time. We were sitting there, we had a good discussion with all the teachers. It worked out so nice. We were able to interact with the teachers, talk about, quickly kind of work through all the different issues we were having back and forth, and it just worked great. I've gone to a lot of conferences, and sometimes they can be difficult because you're waiting to get into a classroom. You're kind of walking between trying to find the teacher, the one you want to talk with, and the Zoom conferences really worked. It was really a nice situation, and they were very organized. About halfway through, her dean came in just to say hi to Jacqueline, and it was just it really worked out nice. So it was really I don't know. I just wanted to say it because it was really positive.
All those steps we had to walk in.
Reports, communications, Member Olson.
Yes, we had a great meeting. Again, we talked about COVID communications and how parents are getting updated via email and if you're identified as a close contact. We talked about that. They get a text message, they get an email, and they get a phone call. We talked about marketing. The fall newsletter is to the printer. This is the one time per year that district-wide, it's a district-wide mailing. It usually goes out in August, but it was delayed. So that's okay. Strategic planning, they continue to move forward with the check-in meetings. And like Gail said, Community Ed Safely Open campaign has made Forest Lake the benchmark for opening safely and still having fun within the guidelines.
9:16, also Member Olson.
Yes. Our entire meeting, about an hour and a half yesterday, was all about phases for learning models. And what's a little different with 916 is they started everyone's distant learning, and they're evaluating when they're going to go hybrid and when they're going to go full in person. So a little bit different than us. I thought that was interesting. So enhanced learning, they rate themselves as a 3, that they're on track. A 2, they're progressing, and 1 is at risk. So enhanced learning, they're totally at a 3. Hybrid, they're also at a 3. And in person, they're still working to get all factors that they identify as a 3. But they do, mid-November, they're going hybrid, and then they do have plans in December to go in person. So obviously the numbers will dictate that, but we'll see what happens.
Member Olson, Policy Committee, Member Luther.
Policy committee, the thing of note is hard to talk about it because we talk about it later in the meeting, but we had 2 new members join us. They're both studying for their administration principles degrees. So they both joined us and were interested in how the policies get written or read and reviewed. And most of the time, just for the record, a lot of our policies come from the MSBA, and we tailor small sections to meet our needs, but it keeps them standardized, and they're already been read through for legality and egalitarianism, and just to make sure that they're good policies that we can work with. So policy committee is more about making sure they suit our needs and they're understandable and they can be rolled forward. And so it's nice to have a couple new members to bring it back around.
Member Luther, Curriculum, Instruction, and Equity, Member Tyson.
Sure, can I just mention a project happening after that?
Yeah.
I think everybody got their Force of Connections, did you guys? So I just love getting this, and I know my neighbors do as well. And I think it's just great. It just shows that it unites us because it lists Carolyn gave an overview of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, which provides stability to homelessness students in our district, which because of the pandemic we've seen an increase in. And the major problem for us is there's just a terrible lack of affordable housing in our area. So the basic reimbursement through the McKinney-Vento is for transportation. So that was the main thing Carolyn did that. Nice overview. We also had a family support services update, and then there were some dates that we looked at and talked about because October was Bullying Prevention Month, and then October 5th was World Teachers Day, and October 12th was Indigenous Peoples Day. And that concludes my report.
Tyson, staff welfare, member Rachel.
Thank you. We talked, of course, about COVID-19 and got an update from the superintendent, and there's always a lot of discussion and talk about that, and way to find the best solution out of not good solutions. And we talked about this change, the enrollment, and the nice thing is that we had budgeted a typical level of enrollment loss that we would have, and we've done better than that. So we have less loss than we expected, which is a really good news. And then we talked about the strategic plan update, where we want to update the strategic plan to kind of better represent a curriculum, to have a curriculum that better represents the more of an equity lens, right? To have more of an equity lens when we're looking at our curriculum, and I think the superintendent's going to talk about that as well.
Buildings and grounds, member Kevin.
We had our building and ground committee again as a virtual meeting like the rest of us, and I guess I have to say that the virtual meetings have been really going well. I mean, I'm happy about that we've been able to conduct really good committee meetings even though we've been doing it virtually. So in this particular meeting, both Larry and Bill Schwartz reported as usual. This meeting covered the CLC project update. Krause Anderson is moving ahead and getting the bids and everything else in, and it's going very well. So it's on time, on track. Everything's looking good with the CLC project. The athletic field facilities project update was also covered. We talked about, we reviewed the athletic facilities improvements. We also reviewed the proposed first budget adjustments that were happening and some future capital projects that will be going along for the district. The athletic field, again, I'll just stop for a second and say that that's the most exciting thing for me on that committee right now. Just watching this thing transform itself into just a spectacular field is just great. I mean, I've lived here for 28 years now or something, and I can't believe what's happening with that. So it's just a real pleasure for me to be on that committee because of that. It's going to be great. And last of all, Bill covered some of the building and grounds items that he typically covers in the meetings. So that's the end of it.
Equity in our schools, member Rachel.
Thank you. So we had our first equity steering team that met. The steering team is a new group that emerged from the 2020 Forest Lake strategic plan. The group will meet 7 times during the year. 23 people, including students, parents, cultural liaisons, community, and staff members have attended the first meeting. Facilitator Marceline DeVos introduced the feedback and discussion process, and we talked a little bit about attending some of those. We're really kind of looking at how do we enhance educational equity, how do things exacerbate educational inequity, and what voices are missing and who should be consulted as we look through the different issues that are facing the district. The equity steering team meant to review the ideas for a cultural response to inventory to be given to staff members, and the inventory would help guide professional development provided to staff members and is directly tied to the first action step, enhancing cultural competency in all staff. Goal 3 of the Forest Lake strategic plan. The steering team also had initial discussions regarding a mural at Scandia Elementary, or the mural at Scandia Elementary.
Finance committee, member Corcoran.
rate is the same as last year. And the first budget adjustment is on our agenda for tonight we're going to be using some of our COVID relief funds adjustment. And we also had some really interesting slides of state of Minnesota budget update and education finance work group that Dr. Massey's on. So it was really great, and I think in the future we'll make sure that all the board members should be able to see these slides, because I think they really represent what's going on and for everyone to know what's our goals for the future.
Yeah, it was a great meeting, I concur.
Yeah.
So how will we make that official?
Getting slides?
Yeah,
It's like every meeting, if there's a presentation, it could just be forwarded to all board members.
Yeah, especially some on the agenda.
Yeah, we'll just have it on.
Yeah, we'll just put that on, because it just keeps us in line with knowing about the numbers. Yeah.
City of Forest Lake, Member Kennel.
Obviously, the biggest topic of all was the election. So, as you all probably know by now, Marta Bain was re-elected to a second term. She ran unopposed, and there were a few write-in votes. I'd like to see what the write-ins were. And two other council members were also elected, Sam Husnick and Sam. I got to take a minute and just recognize Sam. I don't think he's here tonight, but unfortunately he's not here. But Sam has been a liaison for us. I don't know how long, but it's been a long time, as I understand. Received me. But I'd like to just put a shout out to Sam and the fine job that he did, and he did get reelected. So hopefully, it'd be great from my perspective if he hung on to us and stayed as our liaison. And also Hannah Valento was also elected. Hannah is new to the council. So
And the Forest Lake, the one.
Very nice.
Very good.
Professional educator.
That's it.
And it's my report.
Superintendent report, Dr. Massey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I jump into my report, I want to acknowledge Principal Fox and his presentation. He is a laser-focused principal and gets results. And there are relationship is. What we saw tonight is what we did every day in the school. So he deserves a lot of credit. I appreciate his recognition of all of our principals. We have great schools because we have great principals in Stokesdale. And it's so critical. Jim, thanks for your presentation and your work with the EMS program and the programs across the board. And a shout out to Tracy. Her energy, as you can see, is quite contagious. Before I get into all things COVID, which is sort of what it feels right now, the slide I added, I didn't get Tim had this up before you refresh. No big deal, don't refresh. But I want to acknowledge Member Tyson, Member Corcoran, Member Peterson, and Member Rayfield for staying with the board. And you had honorable seat, but more importantly, you made a commitment to continue to serve our district. And we are indebted to you for your service, as we are the other three of you that serve on our board. We have an incredible board that challenges us, that holds us to be better every single meeting and every single month. We're not always in agreement, but we're all focused in making this a better place. So it's an honor to work with you, and thanks for your commitment to serve. We really appreciate it. So back to all things cool. It sure feels that way, and I'm going to talk a little bit about data, as you have come to expect from me. This is our latest update with the two metrics. And the numbers on the bottom right, 48, 67, 37, are rather alarming. Those reflect the cases per 10,000, average number, cumulative cases per 10,000 over a 2-week period of time. You can see the increase over time. You can see that we are now migrating well into and beyond where the metric would suggest that we be state the average. I'm happy and delighted to receive the new thinking, or the evolved thinking out of MDE, that this metric was first designed to be a tool for districts to determine how best to start the year. And it was was very helpful. But now that we have moved well into the year and we're having lived experiences every single day with how this plays out in not only our community, but more importantly in our schools, we've got kind of firsthand ground floor experience with how our metrics are working, how our mitigation efforts are working, how our efforts are working in our schools, and they're encouraging us to pay attention to this data, but also work with how and consider how our mitigation efforts are working in our schools as we consider shifting from one learning model to another. In addition, we're looking at local data. This reflects zip code data. So we're looking at county data on the slide before this. Now we're zeroing into how are things playing out in our community. The blue line represents 55025. That's Forest Lake proper and Columbus. You can see the increase. This is accumulation of cases. So it's not a metric per 10,000. It's just cumulative cases. You've got the Wyoming on the orangish bar there, and that's going to represent that Chisago area as well as Anoka, Scandia, and Marine as well there. And there are, of course, Lima Lakes and Stacy and other areas that I don't share here because it clutters up the screen, but I can tell you that the trend line is similar in all those zip codes. Those other zip codes not included here are zip codes that share other districts. So it gets a little cluttered when I show that, but it's safe to say that those trend lines are similar. The cases, especially the Forest Lake property, the Washington County number is increasing rather precipitously.
Steve, if you don't mind, can you go back a slide again for a second? Sure. On those three lines, just to clarify, on the bottom, the 48.7 is Anoka, right? And
Yeah.
67 is...
Yeah. I'm so accustomed to looking at this. You don't see that there. So the top line, thank you, is Anoka.
Yeah.
The middle line is Chisago. And the bottom line would be Washington County.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. The Washington County line, actually number 39.3, is a number with the prison cases extracted. So if you're following Washington County, you know that they've got a prison outbreak that has really pushed those numbers upward. They've done a nice job pulling those numbers out of the data for the purpose of schools use of this method. So that's been very helpful. We're also tracking cases in our schools, which, again, county to local to what's actually playing out in our schools. You can see that, and this is on a current basis, so this is updated weekly, it's not cumulative. We've had 8 active cases in our system for students across the board, 27 total cases, which would be that cumulative piece. And you can see the perspective with 5,823 students. On the staff side, 1 active case, 13 total staff cases. That includes staff, classified, included, and then total staff 1477. You know that we are now poised with Thursday and tomorrow, today and tomorrow being planning days to shift elementary schools to a hybrid model. And the primary benefit of this shift, as we've talked and discussed many times, is there's one additional mitigation effort for us to further provide safety for our kids and staff, but also extend the opportunity to keep kids coming to school and not be pushed into distance learning. It's important to know that we'll continue to monitor cases for potential changes in this model, both at the secondary level and at the elementary. Our goal is to return to everyday in-person learning. We don't expect that in a week. We don't expect that probably even before Thanksgiving, maybe even before winter break. Some districts give a date. We're going to give an update on this date. I think we're better to be more fluid with that. We've communicated to families that this is for the longer term, and that, of course, is pretty open-ended. But nurses, and have conversation about when it might be safe to return to in-person learning. That is our goal, provided the numbers support that, and it's safe for us to do that. At the same time, the converse of that could also happen, where things get worse, and we see more risk. It's actually playing out in our schools. And if that's the case, then where do we go next? We go to distance learning. Across the board in the secondary, or distance learning at the elementary. There are districts around us that are making that move currently at the secondary level, especially some even at the elementary level. So, just a brief piece on elementary hybrid, maroon students, and this is true at the secondary level too, also. Kids with the maroon designation come Monday, Wednesday, at the elementary level, every other Friday. Students with gold designation come Tuesday, Thursday, every other Friday. A quick piece on childcare, there's been some developments with establishing the childcare program. First, a real tribute to Corey McKinnon and his staff standing up the childcare program in really short period of time. It is really quite remarkable. The governor's executive order is that we provide free childcare for families during the designated school time. Before that, it's typical Sabbath or a fee. The free childcare during school hours, where kids are typically be in school. And that we provide that childcare for parents who work in Tier 1 service fields, medical fields, first responders, etc. And the governor's executive order is that we provide them at Tier 1 for families with both parents, or a single parent home with a single parent working in the Tier 1 emergency service field. Our goal clearly was to meet that expectation, but also if we could provide service for families with just one service, kind of working in Tier 1 service. So we opened up the applications, ask people to apply, but also designate where they fit with those tier priorities. And it's important to know that when we're running the hybrid model, we need the same number of teachers in the classroom, parents in the classroom. We're running an entire bus operation, food service operation. There are no extra staff to shift into childcare. Every other day, maybe on the pair, but we are short 15, 16, 17 parents on a daily basis due to various circumstances going on with an individual or parents. So we do not have additional staff beyond our childcare staff to dedicate to childcare. As much as we would love to provide care for more families, we have maxed out our capacity with families with both parents in the Tier 1 services. It's unfortunate, we'd love to provide additional care, but at this time that is really pushing our capacity. We'll continue to monitor, and when we are able to expand that capacity, we will certainly do. We have spent a lot of time thinking about what do what are the factors we bring into consideration for adjusting our current models from hybrid elementary to hybrid secondary. First of all, we're going to continue to monitor county data, but as I said, the county data is a guidepost. It's not the end all. It's our first benchmark. We then look locally. We have zip code data to guide us with that. We have cases in our current schools as an indication. Are we seeing a spike in cases? Right now, we're seeing a handful of cases a day. Some of them have close contacts in schools. Some of them don't. So we're monitoring that, and if we see a spike there, that's going to raise concern. We're also in consultation with NIH as another indicator for us will be influenza-like illnesses that kids may have or staff may have. In a typical year, we report 3% of students as an outbreak. That benchmark for us is about 5% now, given the conditions that we're in. So if we hit a 5% threshold for kids out due to influenza-like illness, that will be certainly a trigger point and a warning sign for us to consider that we might be needing to look at a more restrictive model. And then, of course, person-to-person spread within our schools. We do not have evidence today that we have person-to-person spread in our schools. If that becomes evident, that is an indication that we have kids and staff at risk within our school system, and we need to take precautionary measures accordingly. So that concludes my update on COVID-related issues. I'll get to the everyone long updates to expand on Melrose and Member Rayfield's comments and Member Tyson. Before I get to that, any questions on any of this?
Number 10. I have, not a question, but I have a comment that came up earlier in the listening session. I just want to add this as a footnote to your presentation on COVID. As I mentioned to you, we had 3 people attend the session. They represented Scandia, Linwood, and Lima Lakes in the session, and they talked about COVID, and I found it very interesting for 2 reasons. One, they all believe unanimously, the 3 of them, that we're doing an excellent job with what we're doing right now. They said that the schools are just wonderful places for their kids right now. And to that note, I found it interesting that they're actually a little bit afraid of going to a hybrid or even less distance learning because they feel that the kids are safer in school than they are out in the community. And I thought that was a real interesting perspective on the whole thing. So it says a lot. The bottom line for me was it says a lot for what we're doing in our schools for COVID. I mean, that we're keeping the kids safe.
And keep in mind, thank you for that. Keep in mind, we are completing 9 weeks with in-person learning. And to a large degree, we were the envy of other districts that weren't able to do that. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our staff that stepped up day one, ready to jump into this. With a bit of concern and fear, but I think that lesson that everybody saw, that those efforts that we were doing in our schools were keeping them safe. There were districts that weren't able to start because staff just weren't ready to go or comfortable. And our staff were there day one, and they have worked like never before to make this work.
Member Olson?
Just a quick comment, then I go to the question. I will say it again, but I'm thrilled that we were able to start in person with our elementary kids. We were kind of an outlier, but still thrilled that that was definitely the right decision. So, Steve, when you say no person-to-person spread in school, does that mean people that we've identified as close contact, none of them have gotten COVID?
That is correct. So when we identify a close contact, we don't have any reports while they've been quarantined that they became sick or test positive.
Excellent.
Superintendent, could you just, Dr. Massey, could you please talk about, so that when a person is identified as coming from a household that's had COVID cases, how does the contact tracing work from the school district's perspective?
We've developed, after our first couple of cases, a checklist. That checklist becomes kind of out in front as a key that goes into that situation by dietitians. We are the RN nurse dedicated to this kind of work, and leading us is Kelly Westman, manages our district nurses, and she is our lead administrator navigating that work. And they begin to identify the positive case, where do they come from, 48 hours prior to positive tests, or being symptomatic, is it contagious days. We then go back to who might be close contacts beginning 48 hours prior to symptoms, and then that includes buses, lunchroom, specialists, classroom, of course, and anybody identified close contact. And the close contact definition has recently been modified by the CDC. It used to be 6 feet for 15 minutes, consecutive 15 minutes, and now it's cumulative 15 minutes. So if you're in a classroom for 6.5 hours, and you're within, if you've accumulated over that time 15 minutes within 6 feet or close contact. Our definition of close contact in the elementary is every class it's just hard to prove that every kid in that room at some point isn't a close contact or
Thank you.
So could you, going back to the tier 1 childcare, and I just want to give a huge shout out to Corey and Community Ed for the work and the stress and just this pivoting on a dime with all of this childcare. And I realize what a stressor it is for our families. Could you clarify, Superintendent, about the tier 1 when we did it the last time? Did we include parents that were just one parent, essential workers, and now we're requiring that both are?
that is correct. And the definition of tier 1 is even been modified as well. So who qualifies is modified. And at that time, one person had to be eligible. But keep in mind, we were in distance learning. And we were expected to keep our staff employed. So we had our para staff working, our childcare staff. We rotated food service people in when need be, bus drivers in when need be, and appropriate. So we have a lot of staff available to support that program. We don't have that.
Right. So do you foresee that if we continue on hybrid for a significant period of time, that we could, is the hiring opportunity, or will we just kind of pull where we're at?
Well, our obligation is to serve every family who needs it, where both parents were in a single family home, a single parent. If they're eligible, we have to provide it. So we won't cut out any of those folks who are eligible and who need it.
Good, thank you. And kind of feeding on her request too, I'm sure with a bigger model and parents needing childcare, that's, even if they're not a tier 1 worker, so is there not the availability to have like a staff per se program, or just like not room in the schools, or just not able to be able to hire people to work? I mean, is it a combination of both?
Yeah, the daytime program,
Isn't
we are
it?
providing for free, so
Right.
it's not fee. There's
Right.
no fee component to it. We are offering the before and after school program
Okay.
for anybody who needs that, but that doesn't meet the need for the daytime programs when kids are scheduled to get home on a hybrid. So that's the challenge there.
Okay.
But we just don't have the resource to hire additional staff, given the cost. But we will need to do that if there are eligible families who do qualify beyond what we're staffing for.
Okay. All right, thank you.
This is not in your report actually, but as children quarantine, be it by either close contacts or whatever the case may be, I know that there's been discussion about how their education progresses during the 2, 5, 10 days that they may be at home. Is there any update on that, or is that part of the plan we're going to start doing reports in?
Yeah, we actually, with some of that nudging, it identified a need to be more standardized in how we approach those situations. So we've developed a framework that families can expect to see, as well as a framework for teachers to support kids that are at home. What Member Lutheran is referring to is if we have a student in hybrid, and they, for some reason, become sick, they're out for, let's say, an alternative diagnosis or a negative test for the 14-day quarantine. We're supporting their learning during that period. Or, if they're a close contact and not ill and able to do work, we want those kids learning moving forward. So the effort has been to standardize what that communication number is.
Because we want people to stay home if they have any symptoms and not worry that their education will be question mark.
Before I move on to this topic, I will wrap up by saying that the governor released Executive Order 20-94 today, which provided further clarification around the safe learning plan. We're working our way through it. There's some pretty significant, I guess I would say, adjustments that are helpful to our done by our plan with those orders and items.
Superintendent, you talked a little bit about just expressing your gratitude to the staff for all the work they've done. And I know as a board, we feel the same thing. Just the amazing work that's been done in this district and just rising to a challenge that it's just unbelievably tough, but doing such a great job of it. So I was kind of hoping that we could give a round of applause, maybe a standing ovation for our staff and show our appreciation.
Well timed and super appropriate. So my only other update is again referencing the Everyone Belong project. Our third session is on November 10th, next Tuesday. We'll have another one the week following on November 7th. If needed, we'll have 2 additional sessions. We've had close to 50 people participate in these facilitated conversations. It's been very powerful and very impressive. And with that, I close my report.
Any other comments or questions? Superintendent? Hearing nothing, we will move on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second, discussion? Okay.
I just want to, as usual, talk a little, just for a short minute about the gifts to the district. Now, we saw a couple of great gifts already earlier today, but the total for the month of donations from many organizations was $33,534.47. So, outstanding. And as you heard, the Forest Lake Lions Club and the Wyoming Lions Club contributed $2,250. As well as the 2 ambulances that were donated, and there were many other very large donations I won't go into detail on. But I would like, on behalf of the board, to thank all those organizations for their support of the school district.
Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion, signify by aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Can we take a short break?
Yeah, absolutely, we can recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you.
God, you're so fast. How did you do that?
No.
I didn't even dawn on me.
Okay.
Wow.
Exactly.
That's okay. Ask him, just use the pro forma form. Do the pro forma form.
I want a cookie.
There's candy, I'll just go wander around, you can get whatever you need. And if you really know people, you can just go, if their dishes are empty, you just go into their drawer.
I have had a couple of these.
It's, you know, the hat for some of these doesn't belong, like if you What?
You were not there.
Every Thursday they run our block, so they were excited to see me. Yeah. I figured that everybody wants to
Put something out and then before the break.
Okay, thank you.
Retract something.
Last week is I know you're well familiar with the strategic plan. What I will say is that we have had a lot of conversation internally around our equity work, our equity steering team. You know that our strategic plan is rooted in the foundation of our equity framework. Equity is the foundation to everything we do. Is one of our belief statements in the strategic plan that we approved a year ago. And there is just a great effort to become more culturally responsive to, as teachers, as educators, and as leaders. And in conversation with students this summer and others, I listened to a number of stories of students, especially students of color, and our white students, talk about the fact that our curriculum was at times lacking. The voices, the histories, the art, the leaders, the stories of our students of color. You might say the absent narratives of our students of color. So as we studied and dug into the strategic plan, we agreed that, yes, one, we need to expand our curriculum, and there's nothing in our strategic plan that specifically calls for that work. And in being in a growth mindset, in a fluid system, we think it's appropriate to modify our strategic plan to include this critically important work. So I would propose to you tonight that we add to our focus area excellence in high quality instruction. Because you might be thinking that this work might better fit in equitable learning opportunities, excellence in equitable learning opportunities, that focus area. But I would submit to you that if we are truly going to be excellent in high quality instruction, that our curriculum and learning materials and learning systems need to represent our students of color. So I would propose that we add objective 1.3 in this focus area that would state, expand E12 curriculum and instruction to be culturally relevant and responsive so that it represents each student. With two related action steps. One, provide ongoing professional development so that educators are comfortable and skilled in the use of culturally responsive instruction and teaching practices. And the second action step, identify and provide curriculum resources and materials for each subject area at each grade level that represents the contributions of the leaders, figures, co-chairs, and histories of students of color. Again, the absent parent. So with that, I would ask for your approval of this addition to our strategic plan.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
I just have a question for the superintendent. I think this is really necessary. We kind of needed to put this meat into our strategic plan. But on the second action step, what is in your mind is how are we going to draw that in and do the best job we can?
We're going to study other districts. We're going to study organizations that coalesce this work and bring this work together, whether it's Equity Alliance, other organizations that have done some work in this area, and we will learn from others and draw from others. It's not a three-ring binder you purchase off the shelf and say, here we are. And you can bring these resources to the table, but some of it requires a learning curve for a staff, and that would be the professional development.
I appreciate that we're adding to our strategic document because so often they say we plan these things, put it in a book, and put it on a shelf. And so having it be a dynamic document, I think is really appropriate. And this also gives us the opportunity to specifically check back on it and have it be a primary goal, part of the primary focuses. And one question, so this is similar to Member Tyson's, are we going beyond who is actually represented in our districts to kind of a more global, or are we limiting ourselves to, we have people of this ethnic variety or that ethnic variety
strategic plan is alive and active.
Any further discussion? All right, Member Clerk, would you please take a roll call?
Member Kettle.
Aye.
Member Kettle votes aye. Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson. Aye. Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Parker. Aye. Member Parker votes aye.
All right, moving on, resolution authorizing the athletic field project labor agreement.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the school board. The school district administration has been working with the St. Paul Building and Construction Trades Council to develop a project labor agreement for the athletic field project. We did publish our required 30-day notice in the Forest Lake Times on October 1st. And this evening, administration is recommending that you approve the attached resolution authorizing the athletic field project labor agreement.
What's your pleasure with the resolution?
So moved.
That's Sunday.
We have a motion and a second, discussion.
Larry, I have a question. Can you explain more about that 30-day notice on October 1st?
We had a notice that was put into the newspaper. It was about a paragraph and a half in length. That was a requirement for, it was one of the steps required to do the PLA.
Any further discussion?
So Larry, can you, I had a phone call with you, had some good questions for you. Can you kind of reiterate the reasons why we're doing that?
We think that we would avoid any work stoppages. We've had great success with PLAs in the past. Most of our documents were modeled after an Hennepin. I'm comfortable with proceeding with a PLA, and I personally would recommend it. And that's probably the gist of our conversation.
I guess for me, reshaping opportunities for success was a phased, and I spoke with you about this, and it's phased in over several years. And so the PLA made a lot of sense in my mind at that time. So when I was looking at this project, the stadium project, it's a seasonal project. It's not going to have a lot of longevity like the other project with the PLA, reshaping opportunities for success. So I'm just having some reluctance with it this time. So I'm putting that out there for discussion.
Member Rayfield?
Yeah, I mean, we, the basic brought up, we had a 4-year project, where we looked at every elementary, junior high. We just did a lot of construction. And every time Director Martini came in to discuss that project, it was the same thing. It's on time, it's on budget. And we just had, I would say it's great luck, but when we went out to visit those schools, we could see the work that was being done in the conscientious manner in which it was being done. And for me, I don't want to mess with success. We had a PLA there. We fought hard to get it, and we were rewarded with really good work. And work that was on time and it easily fit into our budget. And I think that, for me, I'm not going to mess with success. So I'm going to vote yes.
Any other discussion? All right, hearing none, Member Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Olson.
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield.
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson. No. Member Tyson votes no. Member Peterson.
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Parker.
Aye.
Member Parker votes aye. Member Kettle.
Aye.
Member Kettle votes aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to the first general fund budget adjustment, Director Martini.
Each month, the revenue and expenditure budgets are reviewed and compared to the prior year's budget for trend analysis and program review by the Finance Committee of the school board. And as Member Corcoran reported earlier this evening, that committee reviewed and discussed the budget adjustments. And so we recommend the school board approve those attached budget adjustments to the general fund for both revenue and expenditure, resulting in a minor increase to fund balance.
Make a motion to approve.
Second?
I have a motion and a second, discussion?
I'm excited to see that it adds to our fund balance. It's always a positive thing.
Going in the right direction.
In the right direction. And it's great that we can use that money, the COVID relief fund, in a way that we really need for our district. So it's just a wonderful thing that we have the option to use.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please take a roll call.
Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto?
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye.
All right, moving on, Community Education Fund Balance Transfer Resolution.
So the governor's emergency executive orders in May and June, along with recently passed Minnesota legislation, allows for fund balance transfers within operating funds of the school district. The transfers that we're proposing will assist community education in compensating the staff this past spring when they were not receiving revenue, and will also assist them for the provision of free childcare to Tier 1 community members pursuant to guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education. We would still have a fund balance of about $40,000 in the two funds that we transfer from, and we're transferring to the reserved community fund balance, not the unreserved community fund balance. So those funds are still reserved for community ed program. We'd ask that you approve this as well.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second, do you have any discussion?
Well, I think this is very neat. You know, we're usually kind of Googling at their balance when we're, so, I mean, I think this is great that this executive order is in place and we're able to do it.
Is this coming from our general fund or from a COVID fund?
So it's from two internal community ed funds to the general community ed fund. It has nothing to do with our food service fund or the school district general fund. So it's all within community education.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk?
Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto?
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye.
Moving on, agenda 8.5, mandated reporting of maltreatment of vulnerable adults policy. Dr. Massey.
The purpose of this policy is to make clear the statutory requirements of school personnel to report suspected maltreatment of vulnerable adults. School personnel must report suspected maltreatment of vulnerable adults when the school personnel has reason to believe that a vulnerable adult is being or has been maltreated, or has knowledge that a vulnerable adult has sustained a physical injury which is not reasonably explained. The school board policy has reviewed this policy and is recommending that we approve this policy with no changes at this time. And this is an annual review of the policy. Administration recommends approval.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk?
Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Ketto?
Aye.
Member Ketto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye.
All right, moving on to 8.6, family and medical leave policy 420.
The purpose of this policy is to provide for family and medical leave to school district employees in accordance with the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 and also with parenting leave under state law. This policy needs to be reviewed at least annually for compliance with state and federal law. The policy committee has reviewed this policy and has recommended no changes at this time, and the administration recommends approval.
to approve 8.6.
Second.
Motion and second, discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk?
Member Luther votes aye. Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Corcoran votes aye. Member Petto?
Aye.
Member Petto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye.
8.7, mandated reporting of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse policy 522.
And the purpose of this policy is to make clear the statutory requirements of school personnel to report suspected child neglect and physical or sexual abuse. And similar to the previous policy we reviewed tonight, policy 414, school personnel must immediately report instances of child neglect and physical of child neglect or physical or sexual abuse when the school personnel knows or is reason to believe that a child is being neglected or physically or sexually abused, or has been neglected or physically or sexually abused within the preceding 3 years. The School Board Policy Committee has completed its annual review of this policy and is recommending approval with no changes at this time.
We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and second, discussion?
Just to share what we talked about in the policy committee, that there's no changes because this is a very complete policy, and in a time of COVID, there was a lot of questions about things that we're not seeing that were happening, because teachers end up being one of the first lines of defense, and making sure that everyone still knows that teachers are doing their very best, and so reporting everything possible that they notice, and they really do care for the kids. And having no changes doesn't mean this wasn't thoroughly reviewed.
Correct.
Member Rayfield?
Yeah, and I just want to thank the policy committee, or the wonks on the policy committee, because this stuff is really important when we have it, that it's straightforward, but it's thorough, and I think the policy committee does a great job of looking through these things and making sure we're on the right track, and making sure that old stuff is taken out, and yeah, so just want to thank the policy committee.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Member Clerk?
Member Corcoran?
Aye.
Member Corcoran votes aye. Member Petto?
Aye.
Member Petto votes aye. Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Olson votes aye. Member Rayfield?
Aye.
Member Rayfield votes aye. Member Tyson?
Aye.
Member Tyson votes aye. Member Peterson?
Aye.
Member Peterson votes aye. And Member Luther votes aye.
Moving on to new business, 9.1, tobacco-free environment, possession and use of tobacco, tobacco-related devices, and electronic delivery devices policy 427.
The purpose of this policy is to maintain a learning and working environment that is tobacco-free. Policy committee has reviewed this policy. This is the first reading tonight of this policy, so no action is recommended. But there are recommended changes per model policy presented by and given us by MSBA. You'll see those changes noted as underlined in the policy for you to review and study. The first one I'd point out is added language regarding solicitation of funds and resources to be used in the school district from companies that make and promote or distribute tobacco or alcohol-related products. And then updated language around definitions in the policy, and being contemporary, updated section on vaping prevention instruction.
Thank you, Dr. Massey. Moving on to 9.2, the sex non-discrimination policy, Title IX, sex non-discrimination policy, grievance procedure and process policy 510.
The school district does not discriminate on the basis of sex in its education programs or activities, and it is required by Title IX of the Education Amendment Act of 1972 and its implementing regulations not to discriminate in such manner. The requirement not to discriminate in its education programs or activities extends to admission and employment. The school district is committed to maintaining an education and work environment that is free from discrimination based on sex, including sexual harassment. Again, the policy committee has reviewed this policy and is recommending changes based on model MSBA policy. You can see those as underlined again in the policy. One of which under section D, under the heading number 1, having Donna Friedman, Director of Administration and Resources, as our Title IX coordinator, and identifying that name out of the policy. Updates to the grievance procedure, language there as well, and then some other language modifications and updates in the policy.
Nine, any questions on?
I guess one question I have is, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Do we think there will be, oh, I'm sorry. I messed up. Go ahead.
No,
Just under new business.
yeah, it's under new discussion.
We can ask questions. Oh,
Sorry,
it's just the first reading.
gotcha.
Alright. Student, moving on to 9.3, student medication policy 528.
And the purpose of this policy is to set forth the provisions that must be followed when school district staff members administer non-emergency and emergency prescription medication to students at school. The policy does not address medications administered or directed to be administered by responding emergency personnel. For the purpose of this policy, prescription medication or prescribed drugs or medication refers to any medication, whether a prescription is required to purchase it or not. Medication that may be purchased without a prescription is still subject to the terms of this policy and district procedures and may not be carried by nor distributed by students except as expressly addressed in this policy. So there are some additions to this policy that I think do a nice job helping our health office assistants regarding the storage of medication, as well as the administration of medication, and also at the end of the year when we have medications that we get back to kids or destroy, how those are handled and managed by staff members, especially controlled substances. So we're trying to be very clear and explicit in this policy. And then there's language here, updating language regarding procuring and use of asthma inhalers by students. So I would suggest that we spend some time studying the policy, then there will be questions on that. There's some nice policies for clarification of those critical pieces.
Moving on to 9.4, technology acceptable use and safety policy 540.
Purpose of this policy is to set forth policies and guidelines for access to the school district computer systems and acceptable and safe use of the internet, including electronic communications. Again, the school board policy reviewed this policy and is recommending no changes at this time.
Alright. Well, with that, agenda item 10, review the upcoming calendar dates. Thanksgiving is coming up. That will be nice. Right. Everyone? And I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All right. All those in favor of adjournment signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye.